Welcome to Unfiltered and Unstoppable with Rob Romesburg. Real strategies for real advisors, a podcast that dives into what it takes to scale a thriving financial practice. Each week, we'll discuss actionable strategies, tools, and insights to keep you ahead in today's financial landscape. From innovative products and powerful marketing tactics, you'll get unfiltered truth and unstoppable strategies. Let's get started by building your unstoppable financial practice today.
All right, everyone. Welcome back to Unfiltered and Unstoppable, Real Strategies for Real Advisors. Today, we're talking about a game-changing system that every advisor needs to hear about, enhanced planning. And with me is one of the folks that was instrumental in the design of it, Mr. Jay Guerin, our Advisor Development Officer. And so, Jay, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Rob. Appreciate you having me. I appreciate the credit on instrumental in designing. Like, okay, let's go.
That's 100% fact. 100% fact.
It is.
So let's talk about the importance of enhanced planning, and let's kick it off with a fundamental question here. So it seems like, Jay, with all of our years of experience, for whatever reason, for many advisors, enhanced planning seems almost like a secondary core service that they provide. So first of all, why do you think it's secondary for many of these advisors?
That's a good question, and I think where people come in on looking at enhanced planning is, they associate it to estate planning. And with estate planning, they say, well, I'm not an estate planning attorney. I don't deal with wills and trusts. That's not my thing. I deal with the retirement planning aspect of it. And so I think that's a stumbling block for them to get over. But quite frankly, they need to be having these conversations with every single one of their clients, because A, no one else is having these conversations with them. And B, it's such an integral part of the retirement plan to figure out, all right, yes, what are your plans in retirement, and how is everything, what's your income plan, and how are you going to live through retirement? But how is everything organized and structured as to who gets what when you're dead and gone? And no one likes to talk about it. And so advisors and financial services professionals typically don't like to talk about it either. They don't like to bring up that uncomfortable conversation. So I think they kind of put it in the background, and then they'll pick it up if clients are asking them about it, but it's not at the forefront of what they're talking about.
Yeah. And you kind of touched on this a little bit. Why do you think it's critical for every advisor to offer this as a part of their overall firm?
Well, I think it builds a loyalty from the client, from the consumer. If you're having these conversations, you're showing them how much you actually care about their entire lives, right? Not just what portfolio are we putting them in, what annuity are you going to be in to create your income plan, but what does your entire family portrait look like? And that's a big part of the entire message in the enhanced planning seminar or conversation that they're having with people is, I want to focus on that family portrait. I want to make sure that your kids and grandkids are sharing Thanksgiving dinner together when you're gone. And so let's have those difficult conversations. Let's do the planning now. And so many people don't. I mean, Rob, you've been a part of it. You've seen it firsthand. I've seen it firsthand and multiple times of families that are torn apart because there wasn't, either those conversations weren't had or there was no plan. And so all of a sudden siblings start fighting over what's left over and families are torn apart. And so that's why I'm so passionate about it, because I don't want that to happen to anyone's clients. If you can avoid it, then let's try to avoid it. Let's have those conversations when people are still around to be able to explain why they made some of the decisions that they made, but B, so that the kids and grandkids can maybe be a part of that and they can understand what the reasons that mom and dad were making. So I I don't want to see those families torn apart. And I think it's a huge thing to build that loyalty from those clients. And also it is, if you're doing something that no other people are doing, it's that much less likely that they're going to leave you for someone else. Like,
Yeah.
no, such and such advisor does this for me. There's no chance we're leaving them.
Yeah. Well, 100%. The whole purpose of the program really isn't so much the dollars and cents of it and the cabins and the boats as much as it is to preserve the family legacy. I mean, as a parent,
Mhm.
one of the things that would just absolutely break my heart after I'm gone is if for some reason my kids were to just absolutely go at each other's throats over my wife's jewelry or whatever.
Right.
But that stuff happens. Like it happens in
Yeah.
every family in every state and every part of the nation. It just happens.
And it doesn't have to be the hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands of dollars. It can be the little things that are really meaningful and have that emotional connection. So let's have that conversation now.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And when we talk about preserving the family legacy, that is what we want to focus on truly, like generational legacy, and that's a great sense of pride for many families. And we had a conversation yesterday, you and I did, Jay, with an advisor, and we talked about, we kind of made the joke of like, if your kids were best friends growing up, we want to make sure that they continue to be best friends even after you're gone.
Yeah.
Now, if they already hated each other before you were gone, we can't fix that.
This isn't to build a bridge. This is to maintain the bridge.
Yeah, exactly. So, a as far as enhanced planning in general and generically, let's kinda touch on the things like there inside of the, proper components, the foundation of it, we've got wills, trusts, um, healthcare directives, powers
Mhm.
of attorney. How do these play a role for the financial advisor?
All of these, so when you look at enhanced planning, you really need to break it down to two questions. And it's the who owns what and who gets what. And if you can help the client and consumer to understand who owns what, then they can make those more informed decisions on who gets what and what vehicle are we going to use to transfer that property. So we hear about wills, we hear about trusts, we hear about healthcare and financial directives as well, and that's for some decision making when someone may still be alive. But looking at those vehicles, like what are you going to use to A, make it most efficient, and B, make it the least painful experience of transferring that property. And a lot of people, when they're in their 50s and 60s, they don't want to talk about mortality. And so it's so far off, and it's 20, 30, 40 years away. I'm going to live till I'm 95 years old, and so it's not a priority for them. But if you as the advisor can help to make it a priority for them to say that it's great that it's 30 years out. That's why we plan for it now. Now we can start to position those assets. We can put those wills, put those trusts in place, and then start to fund those trusts so that we're sure that those assets, that property is going to get transferred exactly how you want it to be transferred. It's tougher to do it when they're on death's bed, for lack of a better term. It's tougher to do it then, and to do all the legal work and to retitle things into those trusts, when you're rushing to do it. So do it ahead of time and make sure you're getting it done. But the who owns what, who gets what, that's the biggest crux of what you're trying to solve for people.
Yeah, it kind of brings up a interesting story. So when I first started in the business, this was clear back in 2000. I was working for an organization, and our primary offering was long-term care. And I remember I was in a home, and you talked about how tough it is to make a decision or put things in place when you're on the deathbed.
Hmm.
I was in a home, and I was speaking with an individual, and we were talking about the importance of long-term care. And so the title of the podcast here is Unfiltered. So this is Unfiltered. The individual, as we were talking about long-term care, he points over. He goes, "You see that over there?" And he pointed to his gun case. And I go, yeah, I'm not sure where this is going. And he goes, if I ever need any sort of long-term care, I'm going to that gun case. And I was like, oh my gosh. And but I did immediately respond with, I totally understand and I can appreciate that. And definitely no one wants to go into a nursing home facility. I understand that. However, what if we get to a point to where you forgot the combination to your gun case? Like, I mean,
Yep.
that might be one of the reasons why you need to go into the facility, right?
Right.
And breaking it down like that, that definitely tore down a little bit of the walls. And but that's exactly right. You hit the nail on the head. Like, we've got to do these things, but we've got to have home insurance before the house is on fire. Like,
Hmm.
we've got to make sure that the foundation is laid in order to make sure we have a successful retirement as well. Um, and I think that might be a good segue here. And we are in a very competitive environment right now, more than ever. And to be able to offer enhanced planning as a part of your offerings, it definitely gives an advisor an edge. So how exactly does that help them create a wedge between them and their competition? Uh,
Hmm.
More specifically, to those that might be offering more of a transactional approach. How
Sure.
does this offer an advantage to an advisor?
There's a couple ways, and I'm going to kick it back to bringing up the topic of Social Security, which might be an odd connection, but 2011, 2012, when I started in this business, we had started talking about Social Security workshops, and so many advisors were having a hard time wrapping their head around that. They're like, "What? Why are we talking about Social Security?" And the whole idea there was because you're talking about people, you're talking to people, educating them on Social Security and how that works. There's no sale in Social Security. But when you educate them on Social Security and then you show them how this is just a part of their retirement income plan, and now I'm going to help you with the rest of the plan that no one else has helped you with, you're driving that wedge. Oh wow, you've educated me on this thing that you really don't benefit from, and then you've helped put this plan in place for me. It's the exact same idea with enhanced planning. There's no sale for you, the advisor, in a trust or a will or helping someone to identify how their assets are owned and how it's going to transfer. But the idea there is that you're building trust with them. You're showing them a value that no one else is talking to them about. And so, absolutely, I want to work with this person. My current advisor, my current rep, my current whomever has never talked to me about these things. They've always just kicked me down the road and said, go talk to an estate planning attorney. You're talking to me about these things. You care about me. You're doing things differently than my current person is. That's the wedge. The second thing that I would say is, it's we've got some other things on how do you attract that next generation of people, but at the same time it's like, all right, a lot of people have been in this business for quite some time. And Rob, if you were my client and I'm on my 8th annual review with you, like if I've got to hear about Rob's golf game or whatever, like one more time,
Yeah,
like I
yeah,
might be looking for that gun case.
yeah. Right,
So,
right.
so if you can bring something new to them and say, Rob, this is something that I'm extremely passionate about. I'm really boning up on this topic of enhanced planning and the who owns what and who gets what. It keeps the others out
Yeah.
because you're continuing to bring value. So yes, we can drive the wedge between the current people because you're talking to them about something no one else is, but you also keep the others out and you maintain that stickiness by providing that new value and consistent value that you're bringing
I
to it.
I love it, man. That's exactly right. So that overall, taking a look at it, not only are we able to attract new prospects and bring them on as clients, but more importantly, we have seen phenomenal client retention,
Yep.
and creating real relationships with the families. And we talked about legacy earlier, taking that to account, generational planning, meaning that the kids just don't leave. Like
Mhm.
they stay with that advisor because of all the things that that advisor helped mom and dad with. And the statistics, and I can't remember the stat off the top of my head, but it is a very high percentage of the beneficiary, generally the children, that leave the current advisor simply because it was a transactional relationship, right?
Absolutely.
There wasn't anything to where the child saw real value in how mom and dad were actually being helped over those years. And then let's talk a little bit about referrals. What have we seen in this program and how it's really boosted referrals for our advisors?
Well, that's a great point, and a referral to a younger generation, a child, is still a referral. And when you look at that, if we're dealing with retirement age folks in their 60s and 70s, that means their kids are in their 30s and 40s. And a lot of those younger generation haven't ever had a need for an advisor, right? They've got a 401k and they just dump money into the 401k, and maybe they bought some term life insurance along the way to help protect in case tragedy strikes, but there's no one there that you need to drive a wedge between. Or if you do need to drive a wedge between someone, it's pretty darn easy because they call them once every 3 years to say, hey, I'm going to move your mutual fund over to this new mutual fund. And there's no real value there. So the referral to the younger generation has been immense from this. And because not only are you doing all this stuff for mom and dad, you're encouraging them to have the conversations. They are talking about you, the advisor, saying, hey, Jay is telling me that we need to have these conversations. I want to make sure that you kids understand the why as to who gets what. And so your name starts to be a consistent part of that family conversation, and the kids realize the value that you're bringing to them. A lot of our advisors are recommending and asking, like, bring the kids in, like, and we can talk about whatever, however much or however little of this. If you don't want them to know exactly how much money you have, that's fine, but we can talk about the concept of what we're trying to do. And again, you're just showing them that this is the planning that people need, and this is the planning that I do for you. And that's the immediate referral that we see from people.
Yeah, 100%. Kind of switching gears a little bit, but not really. We were talking about getting the kids involved, and as little as we want to provide, or as much as we want to provide. Let's talk about reducing tax burdens and really maximizing the client wealth. So,
Mhm.
meaning, and obviously, we're not giving any tax advice here, but let's
I
talk
am not a
taxes.
CPA.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right, right, right. Let's talk a little bit in regards to taxes. So, obviously, we all know that estate taxes can put a serious dent in the client's legacy.
Mhm.
So, like, how does enhanced planning reduce those types of burdens and really increase what the clients can pass on?
Yeah, so when you're talking taxes, like you just said, estate taxes, like let's put that qualifier in front of what kind of taxes are we trying to avoid? Everyone's trying to avoid taxes, and I think we can all agree on that. And I think the majority of people agree that taxes are probably going to go up in the future. We've got a lot of, whether it's national debt or things to pay for, that the way the government can do it is by increasing taxes, whether it's income tax or estate tax or whatever it may be. So from an income tax perspective, one of the things that you want to look at is if parents are passing away. I'll give my mom as an example. My mom's 76 years old. If my mom were to pass away, I'm in the highest earning years of my life. My income taxes are as high as they probably, ever have been, for sure, but I'm in the earning years of my life. So if I start inheriting all kinds of qualified money from my mom, there's rules that I've got to take that out within 10 years if I don't take it as a lump sum, but that is directly going into my taxable income, and I'm paying the highest amount of taxes. And so I'm talking to my mom about, hey, let's get rid of some of the qualified money. Let's start converting things to Roth. Let's start purchasing things to get rid of some of that, so that you've got some appreciating assets that aren't necessarily qualified assets that me and my two sisters are going to receive in our highest earning years. So we can look at some ways to avoid kids inheriting those things during their big earning years. From the estate side of things, you've got estate taxes right now on the federal level. For an individual, it's 13.8 million, 13.7 million. So for a couple, you're talking 27 million and change. That's a really big number. And that may not affect a ton of people out there, but you do have state income tax, state estate taxes as well. Those numbers are typically much lower. Some states are as low as $1 million. So once you breach that $1 million of net worth, the state is going to start taxing that. And so there again, you have vehicles like you can use irrevocable trusts, that if you start funding that irrevocable trust and putting some of those assets into there, it's no longer tied to your estate. So you pay the taxes on the way out, or your estate is credited with those taxes on the way out and those assets. But as they grow over the next 20 years, when you pass away, whatever the value is, your estate is only getting nailed with whatever it was when it went in. And so you're able to use some of those vehicles to avoid some of those estate taxes. And on top of that, and this is kind of going on a sidebar, but liquidity is a big need at death. And so my mom, for example, she's got a cabin, she's got a lake home. And if the three of us kids are going to inherit it equally, and only one of us wants to keep it, well, it's really hard to sell 2/3 of a cabin, right? That's a difficult thing. Or business owners, it's really hard to sell half of a business.
Yeah, right.
And so liquidity is a really big thing, where if I can have some liquid assets there, and if my mom did the planning ahead of time and knew which kid wanted to keep the cabin and which two didn't care for it, they just wanted the money, well then great, let's provide some life insurance where when I pass away, those two kids, or the one kid that wants to keep the cabin, gets the proceeds, and there's an agreement in place that they're going to buy the other two out. So there's so many things that go into this planning process to avoid taxes, but also just make it easier to pay some of the taxes that come due with having some liquidity, because I don't want to have to sell my mom's home just to create $300,000-$400,000 worth of cash just to pay taxes. And so if you can provide some liquidity in the form of life insurance, that can help pay some of those taxes.
I mean, just sitting here listening to that, I'm currently 45 years old. I have 2 kids, and I'm sitting here thinking, man, like I got to get this going. Like these are things, myself as a 45-year-old and having 2 teenage kids. It's honestly, as weird as it sounds, it's exciting to me. Like I got to do this.
Right.
Like, what do you think an average prospect or client is thinking? They're thinking the same thing as those boomers, and those that are semi-retired and getting ready to be retired, or already retired. I mean, that's exactly what they're going to feel and see when they come into an office and we start talking about these things. You were talking about estates, and that kind of, to me, maybe a little bit like, all right, so how do I keep this stuff private? Like, not only do I keep it private, but how do I avoid probate? And these are things that people really worry about. So how does enhanced planning help help the advisor guide the client and structuring their assets to not only avoid probate, but also keep things private?
Yeah. Probate is a big nasty word, right? Everyone says, I want to avoid probate. Let's not go into probate. And probate quite literally means to prove. So to prove who gets what.
Yeah.
And like you said, it is a public process. That's what some people don't understand. Like it may be lined out pretty clearly as to what mom or dad wanted, but if it's in probate now, it's a public process. And so any Tom, Dick, or Harry can go and access court records and figure out just how much money you've got, and then just open yourself up to whether it's people trying to knock on your door to get you to invest with them, and whatever it is, it just becomes a public thing. I don't necessarily need my neighbors knowing how much money my mom had when she passes away. So it's a public process, and also it's typically a lengthy and costly process. If you're having to prove who owns what or who gets what, then you're having to hire attorneys, and people are going to have to prove exactly what mom or dad wanted. So the biggest way to avoid that is there's a category that falls under probate. By the way, wills fall under probate. Some people don't understand that, but it
Most
does fall
people
under
don't.
probate.
Most people don't.
And although it lines out what mom or dad wanted, it's still a public process, and there's still that burden to prove that this is exactly what's going to happen. So it does still sometimes become lengthy and costly. The second category is called a contract status. In a contract status, things fall into a contract status when they have a named beneficiary. So life insurance, annuities, your investment accounts, they could or could not. Some investment accounts, people have never taken the time to go ahead and actually name beneficiaries. If there's no named beneficiary, it's owned by one person, boom, it's fallen into probate. Trusts are the other vehicle then. So trusts have a named beneficiary, and so the more things that you can fund into that trust and put into that trust, it now all avoids probate. I'll give you an example. And a lot of people will use what's called a pour over will. And again, here's my disclosure: I am not an estate planning attorney, nor am I a CPA. But people will use what's called a pour over will. And the idea is, okay, I've put all this stuff into the trust over here, and it's all great. But what about the things that I acquire after I've funded this trust that I haven't had time to put into it? So you've got the pour over will that says anything else that's not listed in the trust, here's how it's going. You divided a third to my 3 kids. So the only little chunk now is going through probate and publicly accessible. But those trusts, and again, whether it's revocable or irrevocable. So revocable means it can be changed, and you still have, the person who created the trust and funded the trust, you still have control over those assets and that property. You can put stuff in, take stuff out, so you can still make those changes, but it avoids probate. So it has the named beneficiary. Everyone knows exactly where it's supposed to go, and it's read the letter of the law as to this is exactly how things are going. Right. So that's the biggest way, is to utilize those trusts. And so when our advisors refer people over to these estate planning attorneys, that's one of the things that why the enhanced planning topic is so important. We're trying to educate our clients to say, hey, trusts are a good thing. Like when you go over here and speak with the estate planning attorney, there's revocable, there's irrevocable. Here's how they work. Here's what you maintain control on. Here's what you don't maintain control of. And so that they have at least a 30,000 foot knowledge of these trusts and this estate plan and stuff that's going to be talked about. So they don't just feel like these estate plan attorneys are selling them a bill of goods.
Right.
And it just makes them feel way more comfortable and disarmed. And yes, this is all a part of the process, and this is why we want this trust, because we don't want to go through that nasty probate process.
So let's kind of take another view here. So as clients' lives change, because our focus is to make sure that these clients stay with us forever and ever, so that there will be life changes, and with those life changes, plans need to change. What type of life events should an advisor understand? Like, okay, we probably need to have a review of the estate plan here. Like, what type of life events should we be looking at?
There's so many, right? And just to rattle off a couple, you've got marriage, you've got births, you've got divorce, you've got kids turning 18, you've got death, obviously. And so like just those 5, those are major things, and they're coming up all the time. I mean, I've got 4 kids that range in age from 20 down to 8 years old. And when the 20-year-old and then 18-year-old went off to college, someone brought up the point to me that I didn't even realize that, hey, do you have a healthcare directive for them? Like, do you have a medical power of attorney? And I'm like, oh my gosh.
Right.
Exactly. Someone's not going to let you make a decision if they haven't given you medical power of attorney. You had that right when they were 17. You don't have that right anymore when they're 18. So I'm like, boom, get that thing in place. Like, okay, let's figure this out. And of course, my kids are sitting there going, Dad, why are you putting this thing in front of me?
Right. Yeah.
And I'm like, well, who do you want to make the decisions? You probably want your mom on it, not me, but but then obviously the marriages, and so bringing new people in, and the births, and new grandkids, and everything in between. And so all these things are opportunities for the advisors to bring the clients back in and say, hey, let's talk about what's happened in the last year. Let's list off marriages, births, deaths, graduations, people turning 18, and let's address what does that mean for your estate and how should we move forward? What does that change any of your decisions?
Yeah. Well, man, time has flown. We are already ready to wrap this thing up. Just give us one final thought here. If there's one takeaway that you'd want advisors to have from enhanced planning, what would it be?
I think it would be, don't fear it, right? Don't fear this conversation, because it can get into the weeds if you let it. But if you continue to position yourself that I am not the estate planning attorney, I've got a cursory knowledge. And quite frankly, a lot of our advisors that we talk to, they've got a very strong knowledge of how trusts work and how to do them in wills. Don't get into that, right? Maintain that idea that I'm helping you with the retirement planning side of things. I have a team over here that can help you with it. But don't fear, for people that may not have a really strong knowledge of trusts, don't fear that conversation. You're just giving them a very intro, basic level of knowledge and education on this thing, and just give it to them, let them sit with it. But it's going to elicit that emotion. It's going to, again, bring the value that they're not getting from other people. And the one way to not fear it is to prepare yourself. So if you're going to dive into the enhanced planning stuff, then utilize our training videos that we have, utilize our utilize Rob and Rob's team as far as bringing you up to speed on all those things, so that when you sit in front of someone or stand in front of people delivering a seminar, you're not in fear. You're fully prepared. You know the stuff forward and backwards, A to Z. Someone can ask you a question and it's not going to throw you off. And if they ask you a question that's really specific on wills or trusts, you say, that's a great question for our estate planning team. That's not a me thing, but I'll get you in touch with the right people. So just don't fear it. And the biggest way to not fear it is to prepare ahead of time.
Love it. Well, man, thanks so much, Jay. This was a ton of knowledge. You are a wealth of knowledge in regards to so many things, but specifically the enhanced planning portion of it. And the last thing that I'll say here is for the financial advisor that is listening to this, if you are not yet leveraging enhanced planning as a part of your offering, now's the time. Let's set up a call. We will show you exactly how to dive into the system, how it's going to fit into your practice, and more importantly, let's take your client's relationship to the next level, and let's make sure we are protecting them in all factors. So once again, Jay, really appreciate your time, and
Love being a part of it, Rob. Thanks for having me, man.
thank you. Everybody have a great rest of your day.